Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something a bit unusual for us, our source material. It isn't a set of research papers or, formal reports.
No, not this time. It's actually quite different.
It's a single, really sprawling transcript from a Twitter space. It went on for hours, hosted by Alberto Daniel Hill, but with some very prominent voices jumping in. Ovelma, Dice, Beats 3946. They were all heavily involved.
And what you get isn't really a focused discussion, is it?
Not at all. It's more like a high-speed global information dump. The topics just shift incredibly fast, sometimes mid-sentence even.
Yeah, you go from really intimate personal life advice straight into, say, international cybercrime or UK politics.
It's definitely chaotic, but the detail captured is pretty incredible.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We
Right.
want to take this, the sheer volume of information, try to put some structure on it, figure out who the key players were, what roles they played in steering the conversation, and show you how, in these kinds of online spaces, the gap between talking about sex advice and national security, it's almost zero.
Right. We're going to try and unpack this chaos and see how these seemingly disconnected global issues actually link up.
Exactly. Let's dive in.
Okay, so where do we start? The beginning seems almost designed to shock, doesn't it?
It really does. The conversation jumps almost immediately into very explicit relationship dynamics. Daniel Hill seems to lead this part, but others chime in too.
And the topic is pretty direct. The importance of mutual pleasure in a physical relationship. It gets specific very quickly.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like casual talk. It was presented as quite formalized advice. The focus was heavily on communication.
Communication and boundaries, right?
Absolutely central. They really hammered the point that you have to talk about everything, what you like, what you don't like, what you're willing to do, what you're definitely not willing to do.
That sounds pretty fundamental for intimacy, ensuring everyone feels okay, respected.
That was our argument, that it's foundational. And they didn't shy away from the details either?
No, they didn't. What stood out was the emphasis on mutual happiness. It has to be good for both people involved.
Both the giver and the receiver, yes. And the examples were, very specific.
Like what?
Well, for instance, they discussed how a woman might prefer her hair to be handled during intimacy. Small details like that.
Yeah.
And the importance of audio feedback, sounds, moans. They made the point that partners often want to hear that feedback because it signals connection, mutual excitement. It validates their efforts,
Right. It adds another layer to the whole emotional exchange.
Precisely. Then it moved into the practical side.
Health and safety stuff.
Exactly. Things like hygiene, take a shower if needed beforehand. Common sense, maybe, but they stated it. And safety, specifically mentioning lubricants to reduce physical risks and enhance comfort.
Okay, some practical advice too.
But the final point was maybe the most interesting. They framed the physical relationship as something you continuously practice and perfect.
Practice. Like learning a skill.
Almost, yeah. They actually use an analogy comparing it to watching a long TV series.
A TV series. How does that work?
The idea was that, like a series develops, the physical experience in a relationship improves over time with shared experience. The quote was something like, "The end always gets tighter."
Right. Meaning it gets better, more refined, more connected.
That seemed to be the implication, a very structured, almost academic approach to intimacy.
Okay, so quite a deep dive into personal relationships.
Huh.
But then comes the moment that really defines this source material, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, the pivot. It's incredibly abrupt. Right after this detailed discussion, Daniel Hill just completely changes gears. He asks something like, "I have no idea anything happening in Europe and Russia last week." Just throws it out there.
Wow. Just like that, no transition.
None whatsoever. And that's the cue for Ovelma. She immediately jumps on it.
And Ovelma becomes a really key voice on the geopolitical side throughout this whole space, right?
Definitely. She instantly shifts the focus to Europe, particularly the UK, and these huge macro issues.
It's like going from the bedroom straight to, I don't know, a G7 meeting.
Yeah.
Total whiplash.
Pretty much. Ovelma starts broad, talking about international conflicts. Her point was there's just a lack of real progress or resolution happening. Things are stuck.
Okay, a general sense of stalemate.
But then she drills down into Europe's economic situation, the core issue she raised, increasing reliance on imports.
Imports from where?
From places like India and China, big economies. Her argument was that Europe has basically lost or outsourced a huge chunk of its own manufacturing and industry over the years.
Okay, so a structural economic vulnerability.
Exactly. And then she really zooms in on the UK with some pretty strong political commentary.
Right, she criticized the leadership there. Something about the Fabian Society.
Yeah, that came up specifically. We should probably clarify that for listeners.
Good idea. What is the Fabian Society connection being made here?
Okay, so the Fabian Society is a well-known British socialist organization, goes way back to the late 1800s. They traditionally advocated for gradual social change through policy, not revolution, slow and steady.
Right, so the critique from Ovelma in this space was,
That the current UK politicians are sort of secretly pushing a strong socialist agenda influenced by this Fabian gradualist approach. The source even mentioned the Fabian symbol, the wolf in sheep's clothing, to illustrate this idea of a hidden agenda.
okay, so a claim of covert socialism. And she tied this to their backgrounds.
Yes, the claim was that none of the top politicians currently in power have ever actually worked in the private sector, implying they're detached from, real-world business and economic realities.
That critique of the leadership sets the stage perfectly for the next section, where Ovelma really paints a pretty grim picture of the UK's internal situation.
Extremely grim. She argued the country is basically engaging in economic self-harm, driven primarily by its climate policies.
The net zero stuff, as she put it.
Exactly. That was singled out as the main culprit. According to her, these climate policies have directly led to the UK having the most expensive electricity in the world.
The most expensive. That's a huge claim.
It is. And she argued the push for green energy, despite all the investment, just isn't delivering. She cited a figure suggesting only about 7% of UK energy actually comes from green sources, so a massive cost for a relatively little return, in her view.
But the operational details she mentioned they sounded kind of nuts.
They did sound completely counterintuitive. She described the situation where apparently if the wind blows too hard,
Yeah.
the government actually has to pay energy companies to turn off their wind turbines.
Wait, pay them not to produce energy. Why would they do that?
It points to a fundamental problem with energy storage. If the grid generates more power than it can use or transmit immediately, and there's nowhere to store the excess.
Like big batteries or pumped hydro?
Right. If that storage capacity isn't there, the excess energy can destabilize the grid, so they have to basically pay generators to stop producing to avoid overloading the system.
That sounds incredibly inefficient. You're penalizing success, essentially.
It's an operational absurdity, yeah, and hugely expensive. Daniel Hill jumped in at that point, didn't he?
He did. He drew a comparison with Europe, saying Europe manages to sell its excess wind power to Argentina.
Which just highlights the difference, right? It implies a massive gap in the UK's infrastructure planning or maybe just policy execution compared to elsewhere.
So this energy situation, combined with the cost of living, what was the social impact described?
Devastating, basically. Ovelma said the cost of living is so high now that skilled professionals, people with homes and careers, are seriously thinking about just selling everything.
Leaving the country entirely.
Liquidating assets and getting out. Looking for somewhere else where life isn't such a financial struggle. That's how bad she painted the picture.
And this crisis atmosphere then feeds into another really contentious issue: immigration, asylum seekers, and the European Convention on Human Rights. Article 8 specifically.
Yes, Article 8, that's the one protecting the right to respect for private and family life. It comes up a lot in deportation cases.
And it's central to that really bizarre case they discussed, the chicken nugget defense.
Ah, yes, infamous already. It was laid out in quite some detail in the space. The case involved a man originally from Albania. He'd entered the UK illegally back in 2001.
Okay.
Then he managed to get citizenship fraudulently in 2007. And later, in 2017, he was jailed for having about £250,000 in criminal proceeds.
So clearly not a model citizen. He was facing deportation.
He was, but his appeal initially succeeded. The ruling blocked his deportation based entirely on Article 8.
On the grounds it would cause hardship to his family, his son specifically.
Undue hardship, yes. And the specific evidence the Liberal court cited, this is the unbelievable part.
It's the chicken nuggets.
The chicken nuggets. The court documents, as reported in the space, pointed to the son's supposed sensory issues with food, and the sole specific example given for this sensory issue was his refusal to eat non-UK chicken nuggets.
That's just staggering. Using a preference for a specific brand of processed food as the basis for blocking deportation of someone with a criminal record and fraudulent status.
It seems tailor-made to provoke outrage, doesn't it? And it did. It generated huge frustration, this idea that human rights law could be applied in such a seemingly trivial way.
Did the ruling stand?
No. Thankfully, sanity prevailed eventually. The Home Secretary appealed it. And in February 2025, a higher court judge overturned the initial decision. The judge specifically criticized the lower court for relying so heavily on that one single, easily ridiculed example.
But the fact it got that far.
Exactly. The system allowed that argument to temporarily halt deportation of a convicted criminal. That was the point Ovelma was making.
And she framed this as part of a wider pattern.
Yes, she mentioned other cases, instances where foreign nationals convicted of very serious crimes like rape and sexual assault had also successfully used ECHR rules to avoid deportation.
Okay. And the cost of the whole asylum system came up too?
Massively. She cited figures from the National Audit Office, projecting that by May 2025, just the contracts for housing asylum seekers would cost the UK taxpayer £15.3 billion.
15 billion. That's an astronomical figure, especially given the economic problems discussed earlier.
It really is, and it fuels the public anger.
Which ties into that final UK point she made, the dispute in Essex.
Right, about using hotels near a school to house migrants, a school where apparently sexual assaults had already occurred.
So safety concerns were paramount for the locals.
Hugely. But in a related planning dispute, a judge initially ruled that the ECHR rights of the migrants actually trumped the safety concerns of the local residents trying to block the hotel use.
That phrase, trumped the British natives, that sounds inflammatory.
It was reported as a massive headline, and Ovelma said it absolutely enraged the public. It fed directly into this perception that the rights and safety of the existing population were being systematically overlooked in favor of migrants, driven by ECHR interpretations.
Okay, moving from government costs to, well, financial system failures. Section 3 kicks off with another mind-blowing story, this time about a massive debit card fraud.
Yeah, this one is quite something. We're talking about $42 million just disappearing.
42 million? How?
Over 7 years, apparently. It stemmed from a bug, a flaw in a basic debit card processing system. The processor involved was First Data, a major player, and MasterCard's network was also part of the infrastructure.
And nobody noticed for 7 years? How is that even possible for $42 million missing?
That's the truly shocking part. None of the banks or financial institutions involved caught it through their internal controls. They completely missed it.
So who found it?
It was an external audit, required by a North American stock exchange, apparently just because the money wasn't balancing on the books. The hole was finally noticed from the outside.
Unbelievable. And the crime itself, how is it classified?
They charged the people involved with estafa continuada,
Which means?
continued fraud. It implies this wasn't just a one-off theft, but a deliberate, systematic criminal operation exploiting that system bug over a long period.
And this story sparked a debate in the space about debit cards versus credit cards.
Oh yes, quite a heated one. Between Daniel Hill talking about South America and Deisk giving the U.S. perspective.
Deisk was pretty strongly against debit cards for purchases in the U.S., wasn't he?
Absolutely adamant. He basically said using a debit card for shopping in the U.S. is, and I quote, generally considered an idiot move.
Strong words. Why such a strong stance?
Because of consumer protection, or the lack thereof. His point was simple. If your credit card gets cloned or used fraudulently, you report it, the credit card company investigates, and your liability is usually capped, often at $50 or even $0. It's inconvenient, but you're generally protected.
Okay. And with debit cards?
If a criminal gets your debit card details, they can potentially drain your actual bank account. Your real money is gone, instantly.
Right, you might get it back eventually.
Maybe. But in the meantime, your cash is gone, bills might bounce, you can't buy groceries, the recovery process can be much harder and leave you in a really vulnerable position. That was Deisk's core argument.
But Daniel Hill had a counterpoint from Uruguay.
Yeah, he pointed out that in Uruguay, and likely other parts of South America, debit cards aren't just a choice. They're often mandated by law.
Mandated? How?
For things like receiving your salary or withdrawing cash from ATMs, you have to use a debit card linked to your account. So that vulnerability Deisk described isn't optional for many people. It's built into the system.
That adds another layer of complexity. They even got into the weeds of cashback in U.S. stores.
They did. Deisk explained that practice where you can get extra cash out when paying with debit at a supermarket like Kroger or Walmart. While it seems like a customer convenience, he said it actually started as a risk management strategy for the stores.
How so?
By giving customers cash directly from the till via their debit cards, the store reduces the amount of physical cash building up in the register throughout the day. Less cash on hand means less risk if they get robbed. It protects the cashier and the store's money.
Okay, fascinating detail.
Hmm.
This leads us neatly into the cybersecurity situation in South America, specifically Uruguay. Daniel Hill painted a worrying picture there, too.
Yeah, despite its ranking.
Yeah.
That's the brutal irony. Uruguay is supposedly ranked #1 in Latin America and the Caribbean for cybersecurity readiness.
Number one. But the reality?
Is disaster after disaster, according to a Daniel Hill. He said cyber attacks are up threefold compared to last year. The government itself is a constant target.
And he gave a specific, pretty shocking example involving a bank.
He did. A major bank was apparently offline for 17 days. 17 days.
What happened?
They called it an IT incident. Customers couldn't access their money, couldn't do any banking, total shutdown.
And the bank's communication.
Complete silence, according to the source, for the entire 17 days, which is alarming in itself, but also potentially illegal. Regulations usually require banks to report major incidents like that within 72 hours.
So the silence suggests either a cover-up or just total chaos internally. Was data leaked?
Data was leaked, yes, but the bank apparently just stayed quiet.
And this lack of basic security extends to the government itself.
That was the other critical point. Government ministries getting defaced, websites taken over.
How are the attackers getting in? Sophisticated hacks.
Not necessarily. A Daniel Hill said they were using credentials, usernames, and passwords that had been leaked from other websites entirely, in completely unrelated breaches.
You mean people were reusing the same passwords across different sites, including their government work accounts?
Exactly. Which means the ministries weren't enforcing basic fundamental security practices, like unique, strong passwords.
Or two-factor authentication. 2FA.
Critically, no 2FA. He specifically called out the lack of two-factor authentication in critical government systems as really, really terrible, because it's such a basic, essential layer of security, and failing to use it shows a shocking disregard for protecting citizen data.
This brings us to the people trying to fix these messes, the cyber professionals like Dice. He shared some insights from working inside a company after a major breach, didn't he?
Yeah, he talked about his time at Equifax, post-breach. He was part of the cleanup crew, dealing with the aftermath.
Equifax, that was a huge one. What was the challenge there?
He described dealing with legacy systems, old, often clunky software infrastructure that wasn't built with modern security or easy updates in mind.
Trying to bolt security onto old systems.
Precisely. He mentioned the specific task of implementing GPG encryption for huge archives of sensitive data that Equifax was court-ordered to protect.
GPG, that's strong encryption, right? Doom privacy card.
Very strong. But applying it retrospectively to massive, potentially poorly structured legacy data archives, that's a nightmare. It requires custom solutions, deep technical understanding, and often battling managers who don't grasp the technical necessity.
So what was Dice's takeaway for engineers working today?
Constant learning. You have to keep updating your skills. He specifically mentioned Kubernetes and OpenShift as crucial in-demand technologies.
Right, those are key for managing modern applications, containers,
Mm-hmm.
basically building scalable and resilient systems.
Absolutely. If you want to build or manage serious infrastructure today, those are the tools. He also pushed hard for better personal security practices.
Like physical security keys.
Yeah, he's a big advocate for things like YubiKeys or HyperFido keys, physical hardware tokens.
Better than authenticator apps on your phone.
His argument is yes. They're durable, relatively cheap, and crucially, they are literally remokable. If you lose it or fear it's compromised, you can physically destroy it. He literally said you can smash it with a rock. That physical destruction guarantees the key, the access token, is gone forever. You can't do that with a software app quite so definitively.
That dedication to robust individual defense seems to be a theme. It connects to Ovelma's project too, doesn't it? Her AI security agent, Velma.
It really does. And her motivation is deeply personal, rooted in trauma.
What happened?
She described a severe incident years ago involving a compromised firmware on her BT router. She claimed it ruined her life, that her kids' data ended up on the dark web as a result.
That's horrific.
And she felt completely let down by the authorities. She said the police dismissed her concerns. So this AI project, Velma, is her response, born from that feeling of abandonment.
She's building her own solution because the existing ones failed her. What kind of solution is it?
She described it as an IoT guard module, aiming for enterprise-level security but designed for consumers. She's working with 9 cybersecurity experts to build it.
And leveraging some advanced AI concepts. Chain of thought, graph of thought.
Right. Those are techniques to make AI reasoning more powerful and transparent. Chain of thought helps the AI work through problems step by step, showing its logic.
Okay, makes sense. And graph of thought.
That's more complex. It allows the AI to map connections between different pieces of information in a non-linear way, like spotting patterns across disparate data points. Her goal is to create something that can actually keep up with threats potentially generated by other AIs because she feels current security products are falling behind, especially for regular people.
It's like a personal arms race against cyber threats.
And Dysk mentioned his own long-standing personal defense, too.
He did. He's been running a custom-built firewall using the FreeBSD operating system since 1999.
FreeBSD. That's a serious open source OS, not your typical consumer router.
Not at all. He explained he puts his ISP modem into bridge mode, basically making it as dumb as possible, just passing the connection through.
So he controls everything behind it. Exactly. His FreeBSD firewall then inspects and manages all the traffic. This gives him incredibly granular control.
Like blocking specific websites.
Yeah, he mentioned blocking domains like TikTok for anyone using his network. It's about taking personal responsibility for security at a very deep technical level because, again, you can't necessarily trust the defaults or the providers.
Okay, this focus on individual action versus systemic issues brings us perfectly to Section 4. This is where the space really contrasts two different types of cyber activity in South America, activism versus organized crime.
Yes, Vladi, the supposed activist in Uruguay versus the dictador syndicate, a criminal enterprise in Argentina. It's a stark comparison.
Let's start with Vladi. He was young, right?
18 years old, arrested very quickly, just 8 days after a tourism website, Buca Turismo, was defaced on March 19th, 2025.
And his defense, or the argument made by his supporters, was about how he did it.
Exactly. The claim was he didn't perform some complex hack. He used a tool called Intelligence X.
What's that?
It's basically a search engine for data leaks. It aggregates credentials and information found in publicly disclosed breaches.
So he found login details that were already out there, already compromised from some other breach.
That was the claim. He found credentials for the Buca Turismo admin panel lying around on the digital street, so to speak, logged in, and changed the website content.
Digital graffiti, as they called it.
Right. His argument, or the argument made for him, was that this wasn't a real crime in the traditional sense. He was just pointing out the website's terrible security by using keys someone else had already dropped, exposing negligence.
But the authorities didn't see it that way.
Not at all. The reaction was severe. He was held incommunicado.
Isolated detention, cut off from communication.
Yes, a very serious measure, usually reserved for major criminals or security threats. It severely limited his access to legal counsel.
And his supporters felt this was completely disproportionate.
Hugely disproportionate. Treating teenage digital protests with the same hammer used for organized crime or terrorism. The situation got so tense, apparently, that Vladi's own family asked the public support campaigns to stop.
Why?
They seemed to fear the public pressure and activism were actually making his legal situation worse, antagonizing the authorities further.
It really highlights that debate, doesn't it? Is unauthorized access okay if the intent is just to show vulnerability?
That's the crux of it. From a purely legal standpoint, in most places, unauthorized access is the crime. Using leaked credentials to log into a system you don't have permission for is typically illegal, regardless of your motive. Retrieving data, even if just to prove you could, crosses a line. The intent might mitigate sentencing, but the act itself is usually considered a violation.
Okay, so that's Vladi, the activist case. Now contrast that with the dictator syndicate in Argentina.
A completely different beast. This was described as a highly structured, professional criminal organization, purely profit-driven.
And linked to other serious crime.
Directly linked to narco-trafficking, operating across multiple provinces in Argentina. The sources called them the gold standard for a financial criminal organization. High praise in a dark way.
What was their main business?
Data trafficking, but in a very sophisticated way. They actually built their own custom tool, the Sherlock Alert Bot.
Sherlock Alert Bot. What did it do?
It was essentially an engine designed to monetize stolen data in real time. Their criminal clients could feed it an Argentine national ID number, a DNI, and the bot would instantly query compromised databases, likely government or corporate systems they'd breached, and pull back a full profile on that individual. Address, date of birth, financial details, family info, you name it.
So they turned stolen citizen data into an instant searchable commodity for other criminals. That's chilling.
Extremely. But their tactics went even darker. Investigators uncovered something they called financial grooming.
Financial grooming, what does that involve?
They specifically targeted very low-income, vulnerable people,
Yeah.
including minors, children.
Targeting kids? For what?
They'd convince these desperate individuals to open digital bank accounts in their own names. They'd pay them a tiny fee for doing it.
Then what?
Then the syndicate would take control of those accounts. They became mules, basically. The syndicate used these accounts, opened by vulnerable people and even children, to launder their dirty money, moving illicit funds around, exploiting the poorest for criminal gain.
That's just predatory and despicable. Grooming minors for financial crime.
Absolutely heinous. And the contrast with Vladdy is stark. Dictador represents pure, calculated, malicious criminality causing immense harm.
But the source material draws a connection, right? Even though Vladdy's intent might have been different.
The outcome still involved compromised citizen data being accessed and exposed due to institutional negligence, the same negligence that groups like Dictador exploit on a massive scale. Whether it's an activist pointing out the unlocked door or a crime syndicate robbing the house, the fundamental problem is the door being left unlocked in the first place.
And the state's reaction seems focused on the symptom, the person rattling the doorknob rather than the root cause, the lack of security.
That's the tragic implication, yes. The activist gets the swift, harsh reaction, while dismantling the sophisticated criminal enterprise takes years of complex intelligence work, if it happens at all.
Okay, let's move into the final section. The conversation seemed to meander a bit here, touching on broader social issues. It started with public shaming.
Yes, a deep dive into online public shaming, using the Justine Sacco case as the prime example.
Remind us of that one.
Justine Sacco is a PR executive, had very few Twitter followers, like 170. Before getting on a long flight to Africa, she tweeted a joke.
An acerbic joke, as the source called it.
Right, it was. Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white.
Right.
Really poor taste, obviously racist implications.
And what happened while she was flying?
While she was in the air, totally unaware, the tweet exploded, went massively viral. By the time her plane landed 12 hours later, she was basically the most hated person on the internet, globally, and she had already been fired by her company via Twitter.
It's just an incredible pile-on. What was the analysis offered in the space about why people engage in that kind of shaming?
It was quite sharp. The argument was that public shaming has become a kind of cathartic alternative to doing the hard work of actual social justice.
Meaning?
People jump on the bandwagon, pile on the outrage because it makes them feel like they're doing something good, being compassionate, taking a stand. But it's often performative. They want to be seen to care.
And this desire to be seen as compassionate leads to?
Profoundly uncompassionate acts towards the person being shamed. It becomes about the mob's feeling of righteousness, not about justice or proportion for the target.
What are the consequences for the victims of these shame campaigns?
Devastating, according to the source. They mention common outcomes like severe depression, anxiety, insomnia, even suicidal thoughts. And they highlighted a disturbing gender disparity, too.
How so?
When women are the targets, the online attacks very quickly escalate to threats of physical violence, rape threats, sexualized insults. Whereas when men are targeted, the attacks often focus more on damaging their reputation or getting them fired. Still terrible, but often less immediately violent in tone.
Okay, from public shaming, the conversation then swung back to relationships, but from a different angle. Modern dating.
Yeah, observations about the current dating scene. A couple of points stood out. First, this feeling among women over 50 of being invisible. The idea was that the men their age, whom they might have ignored when they were younger, are now looking elsewhere, leaving them feeling unseen.
Interesting perspective. And for younger women.
A different struggle. The observation was that younger women are finding that men simply aren't approaching them in person anymore. The speculation tied it to a few things. Dating apps making online interaction the norm. Maybe #MeToo, making some men wary of misinterpreting signals, just a general shift in social dynamics, fewer cold approaches happening in bars or cafes.
This led into a discussion about feminism, didn't it? And the term misandry came up.
It did, and this part was quite pointed. We need to be clear, we're just reporting the viewpoint expressed in the space here.
Understood. What was the argument?
The view presented was that there's been a rise in male feminists, but also this concept of misandry. The speaker argued that straight men fundamentally love women, but they hate the feminist ship that has been inculcated into women. That was the phrasing.
Hate the ideology, not the women themselves.
That was the claim, that this ideology, in their view, has somehow destroyed what's beautiful about women.
What do they mean by beautiful?
It seemed to refer to traditional femininity. The argument suggested men desire women who still have their female energy intact, who still act like women. The implication was that modern feminism discourages these qualities, creating friction in dating.
Okay, a controversial perspective on gender dynamics. And the final anecdote was about divorce, the mental load.
Yes, a very specific story. A woman was considering leaving her husband. By her own description, he was a good guy, kind, loyal, a great father.
So what was the problem?
The mental load. She felt she was constantly the project manager of their home life, remembering birthdays, scheduling appointments, knowing when they were out of milk, planning meals, assigning chores, all that cognitive work.
She was carrying the burden of organizing everything.
Exactly. And it exhausted her. So she finally talked to her husband, asked him to step up, share the load.
And it's a response.
His response was presented as the absolute proof of his failure, a sign of a guy with no frame. He apparently just said, reasonably enough, you might think, okay, just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
But that wasn't good enough.
Not for her, or for the analysis in this space. The point was, she didn't want to be his manager, giving him a to-do list. She wanted him to anticipate the needs, to see the tasks himself, to proactively share the thinking part, not just the doing part.
She wanted him to share the actual mental load, not just be an employee in the house.
Precisely. And his inability to do that, to take that initiative autonomously, was framed as the fatal flaw, the reason this otherwise good marriage was failing.
Right. Okay. Let's try and bring this all together. This has been quite a journey through this one Twitter space. We started with very detailed advice on sexual intimacy and technique.
Then jumped straight to the UK's economic woes, blaming net zero for the world's highest electricity prices.
Got stuck on the absolutely bizarre chicken nugget defense in an immigration case.
Uncovered a massive $42 million debit card fraud that went unnoticed for 7 years due to systemic failures.
And then contrasted an 18-year-old activist hacker held incommunicado in Uruguay
with a sophisticated Argentine crime syndicate that built custom software to traffic citizen data and financially groomed minors.
It's just an astonishing range of topics, all interconnected in this sprawling, unscripted conversation. That's the reality of these online forums.
And what's really striking when you lay it all out like this is how these threads connect globally. It's not just random topics. Think about it. The poor cybersecurity in Uruguay, basic things like no 2FA in government, that's the exact kind of weakness that enables complex criminal groups like Dictador in neighboring Argentina to thrive by stealing data.
Right. The vulnerabilities are linked.
And the, frankly, absurd situation with UK energy storage paying companies not to generate power. It stems from the same kind of institutional oversight, maybe incompetence, that allows a $42 million financial hole to go unplugged for 7 years.
It all comes back to accountability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or the lack of it. In systems, whether they're financial, governmental, or even maybe relational.
Vulnerable systems and a failure of accountability at the top. That seems to be a recurring theme.
We also saw that really fine line in the South American cases protest versus profit. Vladdy's activism, whatever his intent, still involved accessing compromised data.
Which ultimately creates risk for citizens, just like Dictador's outright criminality does. When the underlying institutional security is weak, both types of actors can cause harm, even if their motives differ wildly.
And that brings us to the people trying to build their own defenses. Dice, with his custom firewall going back to '99.
Or Velma, driven by personal trauma to build her own AI security agent, Velma, because she felt abandoned by the system.
It really feels like a pattern of individual ingenuity stepping in, where large institutions, governments, corporations are failing.
People are taking security into their own hands, building their own digital fortresses because the collective defenses seem so porous. They don't trust the system to protect their data, their finances, maybe even their basic safety.
So that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, drawing all these threads together. Considering this sheer volume of crises, global political turmoil, economic instability, cyber insecurity, financial fraud, even the breakdown of personal relationships, all discussed in this single, chaotic online space. What responsibility do we as individuals, as users, as citizens, have to demand more? More competence, more security, more accountability from the institutions that shape our lives.
If our digital safety increasingly relies on individual technical skill, like building your own firewall or hoping someone develops a better AI security tool out of personal necessity, What does that truly say about the state of our collective security in this digital age? Are we all just becoming individual fortresses in a landscape of failing public infrastructure?
Something to think about.
Yeah.
What will you build or what will you demand to protect yourself and your community?